I want to welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Stephen Procopio. I'm the president of the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana, better known as PAR. We are a nonpartisan state policy research organization. Right now, I'm coming from you from northwest Pennsylvania, not too far from Lake Erie. Today, we're discussing truancy. And I really want to thank the Louisiana Independent Pharmacy Association, who represent your local community pharmacies, for making this happen. So the Louisiana Department of Education defines truancy as 5 or more unexcused absences in a semester. Louisiana has seen its truancy rate rise since COVID. It's currently at around 42%. So I think we have a fantastic panel to discuss this urgent issue. With us, we have Cade Brumley, the Louisiana Superintendent of Education, John Weimer, the Louisiana Supreme Court Chief Justice, and Terrence Williams, the Rapides Parish Schools Director of Child Welfare and Attendance. I'm thank all of you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me.
A quick note about process and the form that we're going to take. I'm going to start us off with sort of just a high-level question and let all of y'all answer that to sort of set the stage. Then I'm going to turn it over to Melinda, who is PAR's Research Director, who will ask a few questions of her own. And then we will turn it over to all our participants who are listening now. Y'all can put questions in the Q&A or the chat. Melinda will gather those, and then she will sort of summarize them and put that in the phrase that to our panelists so they can answer the questions. I will say, tend to get your questions in early, because usually what happens is people throw questions in and then a bunch rush at the end, and we don't have time for them. So the sooner you can get your questions in, the more likely they're going to get answered. And Melinda does a good job with sort of paraphrasing them and getting them in a way that will be helpful. There's also a good chance I'm going to drop off after the first little bit because I've got a plane to catch and nothing else. Although I enjoy my time here in Pennsylvania at this polarization conference I was asked to be a speaker for. So let's just start off. The Louisiana state, local leaders, and the Supreme Court have all made combating truancy a priority. So I want to ask all of y'all, and we can start with the superintendent. Can you talk through why truancy is such a problem and why it's become such a focal point?
First off, Stephen, just thanks for having me on today, and would like to express my desire that you not be truant for your flight. So make sure that you get out of here on time, and you'll be in good hands, and we'll all be in good hands with Melinda. But look, I think it's important to explain it with this context for me. So Louisiana has made tremendous strides in K-12 education. I think teachers first and foremost, but there have been a lot of other individuals who have been a part of that, from policymakers, parents, certainly students, educational leaders, et cetera. And so nationally, on the nation's report card, we've moved from 49th in the country in 2019 to 32nd today. We've led the country in literacy growth for 2 consecutive cycles of the nation's report card, top 5 in math. We could go on and on about some of that progress, and I think that's important. But I share that to say this. Stanford and Harvard, Harvard in Massachusetts, Chief Justice, not Harvard on the Bayou. But Harvard in Massachusetts and Stanford, they released a study, and the study indicated that basically Louisiana was the only state in the country where students had effectively rebounded and surpassed their academic levels pre-pandemic. And they called that remarkable. But further on down in that particular study and report, it noted that Louisiana's progress, even though significant, had been minimized by the fact of we are still experiencing issues with chronic absenteeism and truancy. And so what this Stanford-Harvard study essentially said is, had we not, or should we not be experiencing the problems that we are with chronic absenteeism and truancy, those academic outcomes would be even greater. And we know that through the pandemic, in many ways, school attendance became almost optional to some people, and part of that was the fault of the government. But now, being beyond the pandemic, certainly we want students that are in those traditional public or public charter or non-public schools to be in school as much as they possibly can every single day. And so we're working as an agency to try to do our part to make that better across the state. And we're thrilled, really, to have the support of Chief Justice Weimer. He brings such credibility and legitimacy to the work. And so I'm so thankful that you have him on the call today as well.
Well, good. That is a perfect transition. Chief Justice, why don't you talk about why truancy is so important and why the Supreme Court is making sort of a focus?
Sure. And let me first thank the superintendent for those kind and I would suggest overly generous words. There are so many people that are doing so much, and his work and the work of the Bessie Board and others have elevated the report card for Louisiana, and I commend him for his efforts. The importance, I guess, is somewhat personal. I grew up in a single family, a single parent home. My mother passed away. I was 9. My youngest brother was 3. There were 5 kids that my dad had raised in the service station. And he believed that the only honest way to make a living was to work with your hands. And school was optional, work was mandatory. And he began selling motorcycles out of his service station, and that was pretty exciting for us. And we opted not to go to school as much as we should have. At some point in time, my father got sick and was not able to run his business, and ended up losing his business and took on some manual jobs to feed the family. And there were periods where we were, as I'm fond of saying, broke as the 10 Commandments, too poor to pay attention. And I realized then and there how important an education was. Being hungry occasionally teaches you invaluable life lessons that you don't want to repeat. And in my career, I served as a teacher. I taught law and ethics at the aforementioned Harvard OTB, Harvard on the Bayou, Nichols State University, my alma mater, by the way. And if it wasn't for Nichols, I shudder to think where I've ended up. But I became a district judge first in '93 and later on and served for a number of years in that role. And I saw problems with children in the community that lacked education. And there were some that suggested it's a pipeline to prison. That doesn't mean that everybody that doesn't have an education will engage in criminal activity, but the statistics indicate how sad and disappointing it is. Most people in prison don't have an education. There were at-risk children, and I partnered with the sheriff's office, the district attorney's office, and the school system to take a bus of children to Angola and to hunt in an effort to demonstrate to them what would be the consequences of their behavior and the consequences of not getting an education. And it was remarkable to get to know some of these people in the prisons. They were bright, they're intelligent, but yet they had failed to get an education and found themselves in prison for life. When I became Chief Justice, the very first thing I did was ask all of the judges to get involved in an education initiative. One, it's called Judges in the Classroom, Students in the Courtrooms, where judges educate young people about civics, about the consequences of inappropriate behavior, and respect for the law and respect for themselves and society. That program has been remarkable, but the Supreme Court also administers a number of programs outside of our primary responsibility, and that is to hear cases and decide cases. We operate the PINS program, which is relevant to this discussion, which is the families in need of services. And this is designed primarily for children that I call being in a rut. They're either runaways, ungovernable, or truant. And so this program is something that the court administers. When I saw the statistics and a very young and talented reporter, Elise Tomasino, with the Advocate, wrote an article, and I reached out to the Bessie board, and they invited me to speak. And a half-hour conversation turned into an hour and a half discussion. I had the good sense to bring in some really bright and talented juvenile court judges, including Blair Edward, Gail Grover, and Kathleen Ritchie. And we talked about having a summit, which we ended up doing in September in Alexandria. So the Supreme Court's interest in this is, I believe at our core, judges are public servants. And our role is to resolve issues between parties that they can't resolve themselves. However, we also live in these communities. And we unfortunately get to see a whole lot that we would prefer not to see. And dealing with children that are truant, dealing with children that are committing criminal activity, they're not in school, they're causing problems in the community. It's a matter that needs our attention. And I am so pleased that we've been able to collaborate with so many other stakeholders to try to figure out a way to reduce truancy, to increase education, and to make Louisiana the best it can be.
Thank you. All right, that's excellent. Terrence,
Yes, sir.
you are the most on the ground of our panelists, so please help us through why y'all are focusing on this at the school board level.
Sure, and thank you for having me here to give that perspective from the district level. And just to kind of piggyback on what Dr. Brumley said, as well as Chief Justice, I'm coming from the education sector, as well as before getting into the education sector, I worked with OJJ, and I also worked at Hunt Correctional Center. So why this matters is because numerous studies, right, and Dr. Brumley kind of touched on it, have shown that chronic absenteeism has a profound impact on student achievement. We see it affects reading proficiency by third grade and increases the risk of grade retention. By sixth grade, chronic absenteeism is one of the strongest predictors of high school dropout. It's also associated with higher rates of school failure, suspension, and long-term academic struggles. And just from the court side of it, research has shown that it's a strong correlation. There's a strong correlation between truancy and later delinquent behaviors, kind of like Chief Justice just spoke about, including substance abuse, violence, and criminal activity. So and I can go on and on about that, but the bottom line is our students must be present, right, to benefit from the high quality instruction that our teachers across the state are providing. And as our superintendent here says, we exist to educate students, and those students have to be present, though, in order to be educated. So
Great. Thank y'all. This was a great, I think, level setting to understand how important the issue is and what we're dealing with. With that, we're going to start asking some more specific questions. So I'm going to turn over to Melinda. She has a couple of questions to ask, and I think we have a couple of questions already in the Q&A, so we'll get to that in a few minutes. But Melinda, why don't you take over?
Well, I appreciate her questions. Will she also help us with the answers?
That's not my role, Justice Weimer.
I like you're the first one to ask. That's awesome.
As a reminder, if anybody watching has questions, please submit them in the Q&A. Someone said that the chat may be disabled, so just please use the Q&A section, and I can definitely see the questions coming in over there. Dr. Brumley, I know that the legislature recently created a truancy study group that is working with the department of Education, but also working with the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. And I know y'all were already working on things on your own to address truancy. So can you talk through what ideas are coming forward about ways to combat truancy from the state level?
Yeah, so a couple of things there. I'll start by saying that, our team at the Department of Education has been working with Bessie, particularly board member Sharon Clark out of New Orleans, who chairs the task force on truancy and attendance for us. And they've been working for a little over a year, probably maybe 2 years, on first and foremost trying to make sure the problem is understood. And trying to make sure there's a level set on data collection throughout the state. And they've done a really good job with that, have brought forward a number of recommendations that we have taken to Bessie for approval to make sure that we've been able to standardize the process and the definitions as much as possible across the state. I think that early work, Melinda, has led to some of the early positive increases that we've seen. So for instance, from 23 to 24, the absenteeism rate across the state was 24%. And then last year it's 22%. And likewise for truancy in 23, 24, it was almost 42%, and now it's basically 40. So we're seeing a 2% positive move in both of those numbers. I think it's because of that early work and elevation of the topic. But now Representative Barbara Freiberg filed an instrument of policy that has called together a number of people, and they're beginning to look at this as well. Primarily, her resolution called for the study of should funding through the MFP be related to the average daily attendance of schools, or should it continue to be related to the enrolled membership of a school in a school system. So that's really what they're looking at right now, which I think is a good conversation. They've already met, and I think we'll see more ideas be elevated out of those conversations. Melinda, I think it's also important just to frame the difference between truancy and chronic absenteeism, because unless you're in this every single day, you often use those words interchangeably, and they're not the same thing. So a student who is truant is essentially one who has 5 or more unexcused absences or tardies during a semester, whereas a student who is chronically absent is basically missing 10% of the school year for any reason at any point. So we're tracking both of those numbers, looking at both of those numbers, and think we're moving in the right direction. But there will be more recommendations that certainly will come from these committees, but I don't want to kind of put the cart in front of the horse there.
And on the subject of chronic absenteeism, I think the last percentage I saw for Louisiana was around 22%. Is that correct?
Yeah, so for 24-25, the number was 22.5%, meaning that, about a fifth of the students across the state are missing 10% or greater of their school year. Our 5-year goal on that is 15%. We'd like for that number to be around 15% in 5 years. That's what we're trying to track towards. And we've restructured our agency in a number of ways to support this effort throughout the state. Most importantly is through some restructuring, we've been able to carve off 3 individuals that are basically our team responsible for field support on this. And they're based in 3 different locations geographically across the state to push in a tiered level of support to systems.
Okay. And I believe that the Truancy Study Group report is due to the legislature February 1st, at least one draft, the first draft.
As the Chief Justice said, we hope you have the answers to these questions, but that sounds good to me.
Okay. Justice Weimer, I know that the court was involved in holding a summit in Alexandria recently to discuss truancy and ways to improve student engagement. So can you talk through what your takeaways were from that event and what you see coming from that discussion?
Sure. The summit attracted almost 400 people from virtually every parish in the state. And it was a collaborative effort. Bessie was very involved. The superintendent was very involved. the District Attorneys Association, the Sheriff's Association, the Governor's Office, and the Governor opened with some remarks that I thought were very poignant and really set the stage well, and I commend him for his interest in this also. We had school board members, teachers, legislators, and some of the takeaways are that in some areas of state, we're doing really remarkable work. Our belief, and I think our main takeaway, is that this is a local problem that needs local solutions. However, we also need to assist the locals in pointing out what are the best protocols to use to combat this societal problem. And our plan is a letter has been drafted, and we have a little technical difficulty getting all the signatures on it, but everybody's agreed. And this letter will go out, signed by Governor Landry, signed by Attorney General Murrell, Superintendent Brumley, myself, the Speaker of the House, the Tillier, the President of the Senate, Henry, and the head of the President of the Bessie Board, Ronnie Morris, addressed to the locals and asking them to work with us. We don't tell them what the problem is, asking for their assistance. I think this is probably unprecedented to get, the group of individuals that we have on here, and I think it speaks to their willingness to get involved, to assist in addressing this problem. And the state can point to and help out in so many different ways, and will. They've already asked us, the Supreme Court, to let them know how many FINS officers that we would need if we could have as many as we wanted. Now, I don't guess we'll get all that we want, because there's other areas of the budget that need attention. And they asked me last year, how much money do you need? And I said, I am fiscally responsible. I'm not going to just ask you for a bunch of money. Give me some time to evaluate this. And we have, the Supreme Court has retained the services of a retired judge, David Madlock, who started the first truancy court in Louisiana, and he left the Department of Children and Family Services and now is working with the court to determine what we really need on the ground in the way of FINS officers, so we can make an appropriate ask to the legislature, not just say, give us a bunch of money, we'll figure out how to spend it. And that's fiscally irresponsible. We're going to go to them with a plan, and hopefully they'll fund that. There's so many wonderful things, and this is what I want everybody to understand. There's so many remarkable things being done statewide by various school systems, and we need to harness that and use that as a best practice and share what other people are doing, so that each locality can implement what is best for that locality. And we're calling on judges, we will be calling on judges to lead the discussion by, judges have the power of convening, I call it. And generally, when judges ask district attorneys and sheriffs and school superintendents to get together and let's work on this together, they generally respond. And we've already been to the, I've been to the district attorneys, I've been to the sheriffs. They know this is coming. They've been very supportive, and I commend them, the superintendents, and all. So we're looking forward to continuing working on this matter until we ensure every child is in school, getting the education they need to prosper in life.
Well, your talk about things needing to come from the local level segues nicely into what I would like to talk to Mr. Williams about, which is, can you talk through, I know your district has set up a truancy task force, and I think y'all
Yes.
hold things like Together Tuesdays to encourage student
Yes.
attendance. Can you talk about what y'all are doing in Rapides that is trying to combat chronic absenteeism and truancy?
Yes, I mean, I could probably talk for hours about that, but I know I don't have that much time. But sure, and even really our superintendent, as well as my immediate supervisor, our assistant superintendent Washington, really tasked child welfare and attendance this year with really looking at our processes. And we did create a task force that started the spring of last year, and then we worked up until the fall of this year to really fine tune or hone in on what we felt was really the barriers to us growing. And we feel like we've done some great things. So one of the things that we've done here is mock courts. I got with our truancy clerk, Mr. Worth, who does a fantastic job. And we talked about what we can do at the district level to kind of do some things such as the mock court. So the mock court is where we have all of the players involved. We get our ADA, our judge, the juvenile judge also attends. I attend. Our truancy clerk, Mr. Worth, attends, as well as some of our community partners such as FINS. And we have a mock court at the actual school when we identify those students who are really having problems with chronic absenteeism. And that's the last step that we use before we get the court's actual official assistance. And we've seen uh, great things with that mock court, and we actually literally go into the school and we call the students in one by one to try to discuss what we can do to address the barriers that are preventing them from coming to school. And during that time, we may set official court dates depending upon how that mock court goes. But we've seen significant improvement in our chronic absenteeism from just that alone. But also one of the barriers we wanted to tackle was the illness, barrier. So in all of our schools, well, 42 of our schools have what we call a Trinity Health Center. And in that Trinity Health Center, which really helped us a lot during that, that COVID time period, we're able to keep kids in school if they are ill. We have even mental health professionals on site at the Trinity Health Centers. We have nurse practitioners. So we were able to almost totally alleviate that barrier of kids not coming to school due to illness because we're able to treat those kids while they're there at the school. We also implemented this year what we call attendance navigators. Again, speaking to the process and the processes and things of that nature. So every school here in our district has what we call an attendance navigator, and that person is responsible for all things attendance. So that is the point person that our truancy caseworkers, which is another aspect of what we do, that's the point person that person, our truancy caseworkers, talk to in reference to attendance. And we do quarterly trainings with our attendance navigators. And we train them on what to do as far as addressing attendance, whether that's some of the state resources that we've been provided, like doing the attendance needs assessment with students, the tiered attendance strategy templates that we go by. Those attendance navigators, they're the first call to parents to see what's going on at a certain amount of days, day 3, day 5, day 9. They also set up the meetings with parents to have them come in to discuss what's going on with the students and why they're not attending. So those attendance navigators are doing a phenomenal job at the schools. And we also set up a district-wide sheet that the attendance navigators as well as the principals can see in real time what our truancy workers are doing, where they're going out to do the home visits with the students and parents, the families, after speaking to the attendance navigators. Another thing we're doing here is what we call attendance recovery. We've also implemented elementary attendance recovery, so we're real excited about that this year. And also, we are now a part of our quarterly data review meetings that we have here. It used to be kind of more C&I, curriculum instruction involvement, but now CWA, our child welfare and attendance, we're also involved in those schools' quarterly data review meetings that we do with each school. And in that, we speak about behavior as well as attendance and where they are, where their 88 is at that time, and what we can do to better support or to address the chronic absenteeism or attendance issues. We also use our SIS. We have a new SIS we're so excited about, the Student Information System, and we have all of our early warning systems set up. So we know if kids meet a certain threshold as far as missing days, the early warning system automatically sends out letters from our SIS. That's a thing that is helping us as well. And to the point that you were talking about earlier, we have something called this is started from Together Tuesdays, which is something that our superintendent started to kind of get community involvement. But every Tuesday we have community stakeholders and different people to come into our schools and, speak to students, talk to them as they're getting off the bus, say have a great day and things of that nature. But as a result of that, this year we are doing something called Better Together Connections, because that's one of our mottos here in Rapides Parish, that we're better together. So with Better Together Connections, we hold a monthly meeting with all of our community stakeholders. That's FINS, that's our wraparound services, My Community Cares, VOA, and we have a one-stop shop that parents can kind of come to, and we can address other needs or other barriers that may be preventing students from coming to school. But during those meetings, we can address things with mental health resources, things of that nature. As I said, FINS is there, and we're excited about that. We also have those entities to come into some of our school-based carnivals and things of that nature, and they set up different booths to help to have a one-stop shop, again, to address all of the needs that parents or families may be facing. And that has been a tremendous help as well, that community partnership. So
We have
As-
somebody who is asking, who's interested in the mock court discussion. How often do y'all have mock court?
we have them, we try to have, well, we do as a more of an as needed basis, depending upon, because I'm a data person. So that's another thing that we've implemented here. So every morning when I'm drinking morning coffee, my truancy clerk and I, Mr. Worth, as well as the supervisor here, we're looking at our daily truancy rates. We pull it up from EdLink, or we go into our SIS and look at that every day. We're also looking at our daily attendance, because one of the things that we found when we did our truancy task force and we did a root cause analysis during that time was we needed more training on training our attendance navigators on how to properly input attendance. Also, our teachers taking attendance. So we also look at our daily attendance being taken every morning. Also, at the district level, we look at our attendance rate bi-monthly, and we also look at our chronic absenteeism rate bi-monthly. So, but as far as the mock courts, depending upon what we see in our trend data and what's going on with the schools at that time, we know these are the schools that may need more of our support. So we try to really put those schools on top priority for things such as mock courts. So we just did one at the high school. We had we see about 20, 25 kids that are really having some problems with chronic absenteeism. So what we did was, for the next 3 Fridays, we're breaking it down. Every Friday for the next 3 Fridays, we're doing mock courts at that school, and we're doing 5 to 7 students at a time on those Fridays. But we really let the data drive our decision making on what we're going to do as far as the mock courts.
Okay. Justice Weimer, I know there's been a lot of discussion about FINS, Families in Needs of Services. Can you talk through a little more what that program provides to people and sort of how it fits in with the overall discussion about absenteeism?
Sure. FINS is designed to um, avoid children being delinquents. It is, if you will, an informal process that links family members, because this is very often a family problem, with service. And so, as I indicated earlier, the primary responsibilities is children that I refer to as being in a rut. They're runaways, they're ungovernable, or they're truant. And sometimes they can be more than one of those. It doesn't necessarily fall into one category, it could be all three. So the FINS officers are deployed around the state, and they work with other stakeholders, the schools, and other entities to ensure that children that have, and families, the families that are struggling, have access to the services. So they're trained in what services are available in that community and link the individuals to those services to avoid, and you know, we're trying to avoid the FINS officers being called out too often. You know, once people start having to come to court, as I said earlier, there is a problem. And so sometimes the FINS officers' best work is to intervene early on, before their services are really needed. And that's some of the things that we're trying to accomplish.
Dr. Brumley, we have several questions about parents that people have submitted. Specifically looking at, do parents understand that, if a child is missing school, 4 or 5 times without an excuse note, that they get treated as a truant, and what the state and what systems can do to help support parents to make sure that they understand things and that they are trying to get their kids into the classroom.
Yeah, so my view on this might be a little different than what you might expect, but I'll share it because I share it publicly all the time anyway. I think that this is very much a local issue. And what I want to describe by that is that I believe the state has a role to play in setting some expectations, standardizing definitions, et cetera. But when you really get down to solving for the concern, one has to appreciate that every parish in the state of Louisiana is a little different in the way in which they're structured and the resources that they may have available. And by that I mean, the juvenile judges are elected. Those are different personalities. The DAs approach their work in different ways. There are different faith-based communities or social service net opportunities in every single community. So what we're trying to do is bring people together alongside the Chief Justice, quite frankly, to bring people together so that those local communities are having those discussions among themselves with their players at the table. And that's what you're seeing that Mr. Williams described there and repeats. They've brought the people together to have the necessary conversations, to look at their data and make decisions on what to do next. My position has also been, in terms of parent engagement and parent involvement, there is certainly a role that the state can play, but I think it's much better for parents to hear from their local school with their principal and their teacher or their local school system than from Baton Rouge and state government. And so we are trying as much as we possibly can to provide local systems the resources that they might need to further support the parents, where that's coming from the system and the school, and not necessarily from us here in Baton Rouge. One other comment to this that I think is just so critically important is for a policymaker, and if we have policymakers on or that we'll view, I just think it's so important that anything that we can do to elevate the family in this state can make a difference on the truancy piece. I mean, the breakdown of the family that we have seen has crippled society in so many ways. And so the more that we can do to simply elevate the family in this state, I think that this particular issues and others will move in the right direction.
Can I also speak on that real quick?
Absolutely. I was going to ask you about that. And if you see parents being very engaged when they find out their children aren't coming to school.
Yeah, so just to kind of piggyback on Dr. Brumley, I'm in belief as well. Now we do have, we met with Miss Davis with Power of Presence, which she does a fantastic job, just on coming up with some strategies to kind of get more engagement or whatnot. But we have a great relationship with our Ninth Judicial System here, as well as our ADA, and also getting the principal buy-in. Our principals bought into this Power of Presence thing, and they've literally taken it to another level. But that principal buy-in, who of course are having, they're the ones who are having that direct contact so much with the families. We do what we can on our end, as I spoke about, our better connections or whatnot. But our court system here also helps tremendously with that. So Ninth Judicial, with Judge Lampert, who and now Judge Saspiva, they actually came up with their own program. It's called RETIP, and that stands for Rapids Early Truancy Intervention Program. And one of the things that they do is they go out. One of the workers, and she used to be a director with the school system as well as a principal. So we're so glad to have her because she knows what's going on. But she goes out proactively and makes contact with these families. We did that over the summer in partnering with her, sending out letters, having meetings with parents, and we found that those things have been very successful. So as Dr. Brumley said, I think it's a parish to parish thing, depending upon resources. But we found that our truancy caseworkers, our principals, as well as RETIP, Ms. Welch with Ninth Judicial have done a phenomenal job. And also in-house, like I said, our truancy clerk, we have something called 24/7, that he has a specific line, our truancy clerk, that parents can call into 24 hours, 7 days a week, and somebody will help to address whatever is going on. And that is specifically for our parents and families. So.
Yeah, as I said, I grew up in a single parent household, and at that time, that was an anomaly. Today, unfortunately, most children are growing up in a single parent household. And it is so critical because the family is the basic societal foundation. And Dr. Brumley was so very correct that we're seeing challenges in that respect. But parents have to understand that a lack of education will be a lifelong burden that their children will have to bear. And unless you show up and when you get there, participate in the educational process, you're creating a terrible disadvantage for yourself as a child, and a terrible disadvantage for your child if the parents are not engaged in ensuring that they go to school. So there are many school systems that are doing remarkable work to reach out to parents and to ensure that the children are in school. There are laws that punish people for if their children don't come to school, but they have to understand, it's a carrot and a stick. You also want them to know that the law requires school attendance, and the parents can be held responsible. I don't want to see that those people in court. I really don't. As I indicated, the world would be a better place if the judges had less to do and the parents assume the responsibility. There's one district attorney in the state who's taken this to a different level, and if parents don't send their children to school, he invites them into a hearing on the days when the court is very busy. And there is some embarrassment attached to a judge fussing you for not having your kids in school. And, you know, there are other schools that are providing, and this is remarkable, they have a clothes closet for the kids that come to school and don't have the right uniform. And there was one story a teacher was telling me about some poor kid, his shoe blew out and he wrapped it with duct tape and then was teased unmercifully because, you know, of his attire. And when they found out why he was not coming to school, they went up and bought him some shoes. And, you know, there's remarkable things being done throughout our state.
Right.
And that's what surprised me. That's what's pleased me so much. Look at all of the programs our Peds Parish has. That's replicated throughout our state. And those that, you know, those areas that are actively addressing this are seeing improvement. And that not only benefits the children getting, you know, their education, but it also benefits the communities. And it's a, you know, a lot of the juvenile crime is committed when they are not in school.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, studies indicate that. So we're making the communities a better place to live, and we're providing, you know, there's so many business entities coming into Louisiana that need educated individuals to work there. You know, so it all works hand in glove. There's so many people doing so many things. I commend the superintendent. I commend Mr. Williams for all of his hard work, and the judges in that area who have embraced this, as he indicated. You know, I'm very hopeful that this will be a successful effort to make our students available in school so they can be educated. Because the teachers want to teach them. I promise you that. The teachers want to teach these kids.
Based on the number of questions we're getting, there's clearly intense interest. We may have to do another one of these webinars at some point. Dr. Brumley, we had several questions about the Truancy Assessment and Service Center offices. I don't know if that is run from the state level, but how are they funded, and are they getting consistent funding that you know of? And are they helpful in, you know, combating truancy?
Yeah, that's probably not a question directly for me, but what I would say is that, you know, we are working with the Chief Justice a great deal right now, looking at the FINS offices, working with some of the judges out there to see the ways in which they're resourced and supported so that they can be effective. We are looking at that. And so we'll continue to work along those lines to make sure that, to all extents possible, that the funding exists so that some of those centers can operate properly. And I know right now they just can't. That's part of this task force conversation that's taking place right now to, you know, further explore some of those particular issues.
Are they
Have
operated through the court system? Is
FINS,
that,
yes. So that if
no,
you're referencing FINS.
those centers, those task centers are run through the court, through the FINS
Well,
program?
there aren't many of those centers throughout the state. There are just a couple or three of those throughout the state. I believe there used to be more, and the Chief Justice could speak to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, let me say that there is a statute, and it's, you know, I hate to get all legal on y'all, but that's what I do. Louisiana Revised Statute 46:1941.5. And that statute provides that there shall, which is a mandatory term in legal jargon, be a children and youth planning board created and established in each judicial district by enactment of appropriate resolutions by the governing authority of each parish in that district. And it shall provide for the preparation of a comprehensive plan for the development implementation and operation of services for children and youth. Now, the governor's cabinet on children has been very active. Julie Williamson has been remarkable in her efforts in setting up these throughout the state. And again, it's in each parish. And so we are working with her to encourage the judges to ensure that these children and youth planning boards are set up to bring together all of the various local stakeholders, the district attorneys. The DAs don't want to prosecute people, I promise you. I've gotten to know all of them very well statewide. And Lauren Lampert, who is the director, Zach Daniels is now the director of the District Attorneys Association. And they're like me. They want to not be as busy as they are too. And these children and youth planning boards can be the focal point of getting all of the stakeholders together in each community to implement various programs that are being done around the state already. And they can kind of pick and choose what would be best in their locality to address these problems.
Melinda, if I may, there's a lot there in terms of fins and task and the planning boards, and those are not all the same things. And so I think specifically you asked me about task, and those are not uniform across the entire state. There are a few of those in the state. I know Jefferson has one. I believe there might be one in Iberia, but that is separate and apart from, so to speak, fins or the planning board in and of itself.
Yeah, and what these discussions have done, and the summit did, was get all of these stakeholders together to talk about what TAS is doing, and they kind of focus more on the younger children, and fins more on an older group of children. But at one time they worked together, and then they kind of went their separate ways, but we've got them back talking again and working together to get the best bang for the buck and to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks.
Well, and I'll say we have a very educated audience watching, because they're filling me in the Q&A about who oversees which thing. The children and youth planning boards are coordinated through the governor's children's cabinet, and they're explaining all the different pieces. But this does raise a question in my mind, Dr. Brumley, as part of these ongoing conversations at the state level. Are y'all trying to better coordinate all of these disparate things that are happening and come up with some way to judge the efficacy of the programs and to make sure they are all moving in the same direction together?
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been the work for which we've been engaged for, about 2 years now. First with a Bessie work group alone, and now with this legislative work group. And I can't say enough about really Chief Justice Weimer and his efforts to help us pull everybody together. We are able to have events now and pull all of these communities together with all these different individuals and organizations together, and they're beginning to talk. Now, whenever you hear them talk, and you're probably getting some of this in the chat to you, they're going to talk about resource and funding and what they might need to be more successful.
Yes,
so
many of those questions.
Yeah, and so I get that, and so I know that that's part of what Chief Justice Weimer is working on too, with some of his advocacy, which I think rightfully so. But we're working really hand in hand too. He mentioned Judge Matlock that has been brought on to help some of this, and Judge Matlock has been incredible at the state level, representing the judge and the court, but also just working hand in hand with our agency to try to make some of the connections in the field with his relationship. So I think, there are a lot of good moving parts right now. And yes, I hear and I understand that there may be additional funding needs for some of these things. And I know that's what the Chief Justice is working on. But it's hard to argue with the fact that Louisiana does have a complication relative to truancy and absentee numbers that are minimizing academic performance. But also B, if we look at the last year, we're moving that in the right direction through elevation of the conversation and bringing people together. And I think that we will continue to move that forward. I mean, you just heard Mr. Williams articulate a host of endeavors there just in repeats. And I would argue that, you know, through our team's work, that what we're seeing is conversations and activities like what Mr. Williams articulated in repeats happening now throughout the state. And so that's positive movement.
Okay, well, I realize it doesn't seem like it, but we've already blown through an hour. So let me just
Wow.
give each one of you the ability to give us some final parting thoughts about the next steps that you will be taking at your level, whether it's the local, state, you know, court levels. So Mr. Williams, let's start with you. Sort of where do you see the conversations going, and what are the next steps from your perspective?
So again, I think you know, we're excited about the direction we're headed in. As Dr. Brumley spoke about all of our achievements on the state level, but you know, it's not the stopping point for us. I mean, here in Rapides, just from the things that I spoke about, we went from you know, 22.38% down to 17.53%, which is a 4.85% decrease in just a year. But I think the next step, again, is just trying to fine tune our processes and get more of that parental engagement, as well as partnering with our local, you know, law enforcement, well, not law enforcement, but judges' offices and things of that nature. And also just, you know, just having these types of discussions to come up with more innovative ideas that we can all kind of, you know, glean from each other to help our state as a whole move forward. I can tell you that one thing that we're working on here moving forward for Rapides also is our disconnected youth. That's a big thing for us now that we're really focusing on. So our disconnected youth is our next task as we continue our work with our chronic absenteeism and truancy.
Okay. Justice Weimer, from the judicial system view, what are the next steps you'd like to see? It sounds like some funding requests may be coming soon.
Well, that's one thing that we're going to be doing in cooperation with our friends in the legislature. So we are all in this together, and a lot of legislators have already stepped up and, you know, wanted to provide some assistance, and some showed up at the task force at the meeting that we had in Alexandria before. But you know, a letter will be going out to many public officials throughout the state, and we're going to call on the judges to kind of convene these local meetings. We're going to continue to work with the governor's cabinet on children, and Bessie and the superintendent, and continue to have these conversations until we can work out all the kinks where we're all moving in the same direction at the same time. I think that's critical, and I think that's important. But as I've said, it's got to be a local solution to a local problem. But we're not going to just tell them that and walk away. We're going to share that with them and trying to provide whatever resources we can to assist them in making a positive impact in their local community.
Okay. Dr. Brumley, you get the last word on this one.
Well, I think one, we have to continue to make education solid in all the schools so it's relevant for kids and families. That's number one. Make sure parents have good options on school systems and individual schools so that they're making good decisions. The next thing is Dr. Misty Davis and our attendance team. You know, we've tiered the school systems on the levels of support they may need. And so we'll continue to push in there as much as possible and support. And then finally, just convening, you know, being a facilitator of continuing to move the work forward. But again, you know, it's not where we want it to be, but we're finally beginning to see it move in the right direction with everyone working together.
Well, thank you all for the insight today. I think it was a really great, informative policy discussion. I want to thank our sponsor, the Louisiana Independent Pharmacies Association, and for everybody who is watching or who may be interested, the the webinar will be posted on our YouTube site later for continued viewing. So thank you again. I really appreciate you all being here and talking through this topic with us.
Thank you for having me.